picture the executive boardroom. Mahogany tables, super slick PowerPoint slides.
Oh yeah, the classic setup.
Right. And the CEO points to a chart showing this massive, exponential hockey stick growth curve. And everyone around the table just nods in this quiet awe.
Because the new billion-dollar strategy has just been declared a guaranteed success.
Exactly. It's glorious, it's clean, it's this pure intellect, perfectly solved on paper. But then, Monday morning rolls around.
And reality hits.
Yeah. You step out of that boardroom and into the actual living, breathing company. The messy reality of middle management, factory floors, budget wars, and just human psychology.
Right, the stuff that doesn't fit neatly on a slide.
And suddenly that beautiful PowerPoint deck feels completely disconnected from reality. By Tuesday, the strategy is essentially dead on the factory floor.
It's so common. It really is.
Why does that happen? Because formulating a grand plan is easy, but implementing it, that is an absolute battlefield.
And that battlefield is exactly where the vast majority of grand corporate visions they simply evaporate. I mean, a brilliant formulation does not magically translate into execution.
Right.
There is this fundamental concept of fit that has to be achieved. If the organizational structure, the deeply ingrained culture, the available resources, and the daily habits of the people don't perfectly interlock with that new strategic direction.
It just falls apart.
Completely. The organization will violently reject the strategy. It's much like a body rejecting a mismatched organ transplant.
Wow, that is a visceral image. But it's true. Welcome to our deep dive, everyone, and I am speaking directly to you right now. Yes, you, the MBA student listening to this while commuting or maybe making coffee, gearing up for your strategic management exams.
It's crunch time.
It is. And today, our mission is incredibly specific. We are going to decode, analyze, and lock into your memory the mechanics of strategy implementation.
Because while creating a strategy might get you on the cover of Forbes, implementing it is where you actually earn your paycheck.
Exactly. Even the most, market-disrupting visionary plan is utterly useless if it isn't put into action. Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to make sure you walk into that exam room completely bulletproof.
That's the goal.
We are going to heavily prioritize the two massive areas that dictate success or failure and are virtually guaranteed to be on your exam. Those are barriers and issues in implementation and the absolute lifeblood of the entire process, which is resource allocation.
Yeah, and we really need to start by dismantling a very dangerous cognitive bias that plagues top leadership.
Oh, the incubator effect.
Exactly. Leaders will spend 6, 8, maybe 12 months in an incubator, surrounded by consultants designing a strategy. By the time they present it to the company, they have lived with it for so long that to them, it already feels like reality.
Like they're already emotionally invested.
But there is absolutely no natural law that says a well-designed strategy will be automatically embraced by the workforce. Strategic leaders must actively defend the new direction from every conceivable angle.
They have to sell it.
They have to campaign for it. They must painstakingly communicate how the strategy will practically benefit the organization, securing the wholehearted support of employees from the C-suite all the way down to the frontline workers.
And before you even deal with the psychology of the workers, there is this massive wall of structural and legal reality you have to climb.
Oh, the legal track.
Yes. So designing a state-of-the-art magnetic levitation high-speed train. The blueprints are flawless.
Yeah.
But if you try to launch it in a country that only has 19th century narrow-gauge tracks, you're going absolutely nowhere.
You're just derailed before you begin.
Right. The legal and regulatory environment is the track. You can't just decree a new business model without running it through hardcore compliance.
That high-speed train metaphor captures the friction perfectly. If you are operating, for example, within the Indian regulatory framework, which is highly complex and a vital context for your exam, you have a strict legal checklist just to activate the strategy.
Let's walk through that.
Sure. Let's say your grand strategy involves spinning off a new subsidiary. You immediately hit the Companies Act of 1956. You have to formally incorporate.
Okay, that's step one.
Right. But then, if your strategy requires massive capital injection from the public markets, you are instantly operating under the strictures of the SEBI Act of 1992.
So now you're dealing with the securities board.
Exactly. You have to file prospectuses, deal with disclosures, and manage investor relations protocols before a single dollar hits your account.
And what if the strategy is aggressive market expansion? Like, you want to buy up your competitors, consolidate the market, and dominate the supply chain.
Then you run headfirst into competition law.
Right.
You cannot simply monopolize a sector without heavy regulatory scrutiny. And if your expansion involves importing cutting-edge manufacturing technology from Germany or software from Silicon Valley, you are immediately bound by foreign exchange regulations, FARA and FEMA from 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to navigate currency controls, repatriation of profits, and import duties. It fundamentally alters the financial modeling of your strategy.
Which means the beautiful profit margins on that PowerPoint slide are suddenly shrinking in real time.
Exactly.
And we haven't even talked about the intellectual property.
Oh, that's a whole other layer. Protecting the core assets of the strategy requires mobilization under the Indian Patents Act of 1995, the Trade and Merchandise Marks Act of 1958, and the Copyrights Act of 1957.
Because a brilliant tech strategy is worthless if a competitor can legally reverse engineer it on day two.
Precisely. And beyond corporate law, there is the human and environmental impact. Your new manufacturing strategy must strictly adhere to labor laws.
Things like working hours and wages.
Yes, regulations regarding working hours, payment of wages, welfare amenities, and specific protections for women and children.
And if you're building a massive new chemical plant to support this strategy, you have the Environment Protection Act of 1986. You are dealing with pollution control boards, environmental impact assessments, and, local community pushback.
And here's something that often gets overlooked. Even the opposite strategy, a strategic retreat, is heavily regulated.
Wait, really? Like shutting things down?
Absolutely. If the brilliant plan is to exit a failing market, to shut down operations and cut your losses, you cannot just lock the factory doors and walk away in the middle of the night.
Right, that makes sense.
Winding up operations is scrutinized just as closely as starting them. Whether you are restructuring and offering a golden handshake, which is a lucrative severance package to incentivize voluntary retirement, or if you are forced to ask employees to leave en masse, there are strict legal frameworks governing those exits to protect workers and creditors.
So the tracks are finally laid. You've cleared the regulatory hurdles. You've got the permits. You are legally allowed to operate. But the C-suite can't personally oversee every single daily task.
No, they'd burn out in a week.
Right. So how does the grand vision actually translate to the person working the loading dock or writing the code? This is where the broad strategy has to be broken down into functional departmental action plans.
Action plans are the translation layer. They take the lofty strategic objective and convert them into operational reality at the departmental level.
So taking the buzzwords and making them real.
Exactly. An action plan strips away the corporate jargon and establishes accountability. It dictates explicitly who is doing what specific resources and support are required from other departments at various stages of the rollout. What are the immediate priorities for this quarter?
It gets super granular.
Very. Every tiny specific action must have a clear line of sight back to the broad objectives of the overall strategy, ensuring there is no deviation from its original letter and spirit.
But here's where we hit the real friction. I mean, you can write the best action plan in the world. You can mandate the new processes. But at the end of the day, an action plan is just a PDF in an email attachment.
It's just words on a screen.
Right. It doesn't do the work. Human beings do the work. And if those human beings don't have a compelling, self-interested reason to change their behavior, they won't.
Human nature.
Yeah. And this brings us to the first major conceptual hurdle for your exam, the human and structural barriers to implementation. We have to talk about how we reward people.
Reward systems are the invisible hand of strategy implementation. You can tell your employees to pursue a new direction all day long, but they will ultimately do whatever gets them paid, promoted, and praised.
Off of the money.
Always. And when designing empowering systems and rewards, management faces a severe tension between the time horizons of the strategy. Short-term performance is incredibly easy to measure and reward. It relies on quantitative measures.
Like widgets produced.
Exactly. A factory manager produces 50 more units this week, they get a productivity bonus. A salesperson closes 5 more deals this month, they get a commission check. It is immediate, numerical, and highly effective for driving short-term, repetitive tasks.
But what if the new strategy isn't about doing the old things faster? What if the strategy is a 5-year transformation? Let's say you are a legacy auto manufacturer and the CEO announces a pivot to electric vehicles.
Okay, big shift.
Right. But if you keep paying your sales managers a massive quarterly bonus based purely on how many traditional gas-guzzling SUVs they push off the lot, they are going to ignore the EV rollout completely.
Of course they will.
The short-term quantitative reward is actively suffocating the long-term strategic shift.
That is a classic misalignment. For long-term strategic shifts, organizations must link rewards to qualitative measures, perhaps blended with a few high-level, long-horizon quantitative metrics.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Well, you have to reward the process of transformation, not just the immediate financial output. And this ties directly into the psychology of risk.
What's fascinating here is how often a company's stated strategy is completely undermined by its own bonus structure.
Oh, it happens all the time.
Imagine a tech company that is losing market share. The leadership team decides they need a culture of aggressive innovation. They stand up at the all-hands meeting and declare, "We want risk takers, we want disruptors, don't be afraid to fail."
Very inspiring speech.
Super inspiring.
Okay.
But how do they evaluate performance at the end of the year?
They almost always revert to standard quantitative metrics. Did you hit your revenue quota? Did your department stay under budget? Did you meet your quarterly KPIs?
Right. And if an employee actually listened to the CEO, took a massive risk on a wild new software product, and it failed, which is the nature of risk, they miss all their quantitative metrics.
They get penalized.
Exactly. They get no bonus, and they might even get fired. The entire workforce watches this happen, and they instantly realize the stated strategy is a trap.
A total trap.
So they adopt deeply risk-averse behavior just to protect their livelihoods. If you actually want risk-prone, entrepreneurial behavior, you cannot use rigid quantitative metrics.
No, you can't.
You have to use qualitative evaluations, offering bonuses or stock options based on the ambition and execution of the effort, regardless of the immediate quarterly return.
When a reward system punishes the exact behavior the strategy requires, implementation is impossible. And this complexity scales up when we look at individual versus group rewards.
Oh, this is tricky.
Yeah, designing a compensation package requires linking rewards to capability, effort, and job satisfaction. The critical variable here is the nature of the work itself, specifically isolation versus interdependence.
Let's break that down for the listeners. If I am an independent insurance broker, my success is almost entirely based on my own hustle. I make the calls, I close the deals. My performance can be cleanly isolated from the rest of the company.
Yes.
In that scenario, individual rewards make total sense. It drives me to work harder.
Individual rewards are highly effective when you can draw a direct, undeniable line between one person's effort and a specific outcome. This is also true for specific managerial contributions or when a company is trying to foster highly competitive solo entrepreneurial behavior within its ranks.
Like an eat-what-you-kill environment.
Right. But modern corporate strategy rarely relies on lone wolves anymore.
Exactly. What if we are a team of software engineers building a complex app? My code has to integrate perfectly with your code, and the UI designer has to make it look good, and the QA tester has to find our bugs. We are totally interdependent.
In a highly interdependent environment, deploying individual rewards is catastrophic to the strategy.
Catastrophic. That's a strong word.
It is, but it's accurate. If you single out and heavily reward one software engineer on that team, you instantly breed resentment. Worse, you incentivize information hoarding.
Oh, right. Why would I help you debug your code if I am competing against you for the single performance bonus at the end of the year?
Exactly. When success requires cooperation, teamwork, and seamless handoffs, group reward schemes are fundamentally necessary to align the team's behavior with the strategy.
So getting the incentives right on a team level is hard enough, but let's zoom out to the macro level of a massive corporation. This brings up the conflict between corporate perspectives and strategic business unit, or SBU, perspectives.
Right, the SBU dynamic.
For you listening, think of an SBU as a semi-autonomous division within a giant conglomerate. Imagine a parent company that owns a division making consumer smartphones and another totally separate division building industrial MRI machines.
In multi-divisional organizations, corporate leadership faces the daunting task of designing reward systems that balance the overarching interests of the parent company with the specific, localized interests of these semi-independent SBUs.
It sounds like walking a tightrope.
It really is. If an SBU operates in a completely distinct market, like the MRI machines compared to the smartphones, and its daily operations don't significantly impact the rest of the portfolio, then highly localized, unit-based reward schemes are appropriate. You want that SBU management team completely focused on their specific market dynamics.
But let me challenge that, because the real world is rarely that clean.
Their point.
If I am the general manager of the smartphone division, I have a dual responsibility. I am supposed to maximize the profit of my specific unit, but I'm also a senior leader in the parent company, supposed to support the overall corporate mission.
Right.
If my bonus is calculated purely on the smartphone division's profit and loss statement, I am going to behave like a ruthless warlord.
Oh, warlord.
Yeah. Why would I ever share my top engineering talent with another division? Why would I agree to corporate-wide cost-cutting measures if it hurts my unit's numbers? The localized reward system forces me to actively fight the corporate strategy.
And the warlord phenomenon is a very real barrier to implementation. When general managers with dual responsibilities are incentivized purely on local metrics, the broader corporate strategy inevitably fractures.
Everyone just retreats into their silos.
Exactly. Divisions stop communicating, they duplicate efforts, and they fight over corporate resources. To prevent this, leadership must carefully design a balanced, empowering environment.
How does that look?
The compensation and evaluation of that SBU manager must heavily weigh their contribution to the corporate whole, forcing them to see beyond the walls of their own division.
It's like trying to tune a massive, complex engine while it's running down the highway. You tweak the individual rewards to boost sales, but team collaboration collapses. You push for short-term revenue, and long-term innovation dies.
It's a constant balancing act.
The barriers to implementation aren't just technical. They are deeply behavioral. To survive this, to prevent these barriers from tearing the company apart, you need a holistic framework to align every single moving part.
Which brings us to the theoretical core of organizational alignment. In the 1970s, management theorists Steiner and Miner posited that implementing strategy is essentially about designing and managing systems to achieve the optimal integration of people, structures, processes, and resources.
Okay.
To actually map and visualize this complex integration, the McKinsey consultancy firm developed a diagnostic tool that remains the gold standard today: the McKinsey 7S model.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the McKinsey 7S framework forces you to stop looking at a company as a hierarchy on a piece of paper and start looking at it as a living organism.
Yes, that's a great way to frame it.
It argues that effective execution is about so much more than just the strategy itself. The strategy is just one of 7 deeply interconnected variables.
The 7 variables, the 7 S's, are strategy, structure, systems, style, staff, skills, and superordinate goals, which are frequently referred to as shared values.
That's a lot of S's.
It is. But the fundamental axiom of this model is total interconnectedness. You cannot alter one single element without sending shockwaves through all the others. Significant organizational change requires deliberate, synchronized adjustments across the entire board.
I always picture the 7S model as a giant, highly pensioned spider web. You can't just walk up and violently yank one string, say, completely changing your strategy to target a brand new international market, without the entire rest of the web vibrating, warping, and potentially tearing apart.
The tension is real.
If you change the strategy, you have to change the structure to support it, the systems to measure it, the skills to execute it.
The spider web is the perfect visualization because, notably, the McKinsey diagram has no starting point. There is no implied hierarchy.
Oh, so strategy isn't at the top.
Exactly. Strategy does not sit at the top of a pyramid dictating to the others. All 7 elements are equally critical. In one organization, the bottleneck to implementation might be outdated systems. In another, it might be a toxic management style.
It depends on the company.
Right. The driving force for change is entirely dependent on the specific context of the organization at that moment in time.
To make this digestible, the creators divided these 7 variables into 2 distinct categories: the hard elements and the soft elements.
Right.
The hard elements are strategy, structure, and systems. They're called hard not because they are difficult, but because they are tangible. They're documented in manuals, org charts, and software code. They are easy for management to see and manipulate. Let's look at structure.
Structure represents the durable organizational arrangements and reporting lines. It dictates who has authority, how communication flows, and how responsibilities are divided.
The skeleton of the company.
Exactly. Structure serves several vital functions. It reduces external uncertainty by providing a unified front to the market. It reduces internal uncertainty by clarifying roles, mitigating the unpredictable nature of human behavior.
It stops everyone from just running around doing whatever they want.
Right. It enables specialization through departmentalization, and ultimately it coordinates disparate activities toward a singular objective.
And there is a golden rule here, formulated by the business historian Alfred Chandler, which is a classic exam concept. Structure must follow strategy.
Chandler's rule is foundational. If a company shifts from a strategy of producing a single product for a local market to a strategy of producing dozens of products for a global market, their old centralized functional structure will immediately become a bottleneck.
It'll just snap.
Right. They must restructure perhaps into a decentralized, geographic, or product-based division model. The structure must be built to carry the weight of the new strategy. However, McKinsey adds a critical nuance.
Which is?
Simply changing the org chart rarely solves the core issues. Execution requires aligning the other variables, starting with systems.
Systems are the invisible plumbing of the organization. They are the daily procedures, both formal and informal, that actually keep the lights on and the business moving.
Systems are the gears that make the structure turn. They encompass production planning, supply chain logistics, cost accounting procedures, capital budgeting protocols, and performance evaluation metrics.
So everything that makes it run day to day.
Exactly. Imagine a retail company whose new strategy is ultra-fast, next-day delivery to compete with e-commerce giants.
Okay.
If their legacy cost accounting system still requires 3 levels of managerial approval and a 2-week processing time for any expedited shipping expense, the strategy is dead on arrival.
Wow, yeah. The systems are actively fighting the strategy.
They must be overhauled to match the new speed of the business.
So strategy, structure, and systems are the tangible, mechanical parts of the company. But the true genius of the McKinsey model is its insistence that these soft elements, style, staff, skills, and superordinate goals, are just as powerful, even if they are much harder to quantify and manipulate.
They are the soul of the company.
Let's dive into skills. This isn't just about whether your employees know how to use Excel. It's about the distinctive competencies of the organization itself.
Skills are the institutional capabilities that a company develops over decades. They are what the company is fundamentally best at in the world.
Like core strengths.
Yes. Historically, Hindustan Lever built an impenetrable, distinctive competency in consumer marketing and distribution. Telco was globally renowned for its heavy engineering skills. IBM built an empire not just on hardware, but on unparalleled corporate customer service.
Right.
DuPont's DNA was rooted in advanced chemical research and development, while Sony possessed a unique organizational skill for rapid new product development and miniaturization.
Oh, that's a great example.
When implementing a new strategy, leadership must ruthlessly assess, do we actually possess the institutional skills to pull this off? If a company known for cheap manufacturing suddenly tries to execute a premium luxury strategy, they will fail unless they systematically build entirely new skills.
Next is staff. And again, this isn't just looking at the headcount or the payroll budget. It's about how you treat the human capital.
Yes, the people side.
How do you select people? How do you socialize them into the company culture? Are you developing their abilities, giving them challenging assignments to stretch their potential, and motivating them to actually care about the work?
Which bleeds directly into style. Style is the cultural operating system of the company. It is not what the company says in its brochures. It is the pattern of actions taken by top management over time.
Actions speak louder than words.
Always. Is the management style highly autocratic and hierarchical, where decisions are handed down from on high, or is it egalitarian and collaborative?
Because if a traditional, highly bureaucratic bank tries to implement an agile, fast-moving fintech strategy, the deeply ingrained conservative style of the management team will constantly clash with the need for rapid experimentation.
Absolutely. Nurturing a fit between the cultural style and the strategic goal is often the hardest part of change management.
And sitting at the absolute dead center of the 7S spiderweb, connecting to every single other element, are the superordinate goals.
The shared values. These are the higher-order goals that transcend quarterly profits. They articulate the fundamental purpose, the vision, and the core beliefs that senior management brings to the organization.
It's the why.
They are the spiritual center of the business. If a company's superordinate goal has always been uncompromising safety and reliability, and a new CEO introduces a strategy of move fast, cut corners, and undercut the competition on price, the cognitive dissonance will tear the organization apart.
Because the strategy is fundamentally at odds with the soul of the company.
Precisely.
So, to you listening, when you are sitting in that exam room analyzing a case study about a failed corporate merger or a botched product launch, don't just critique the strategy itself. Run it through the 7S framework.
Yes, use the tool.
Did the new strategy break the old structure? Did the legacy system suffocate the new skills required? Was the leadership style toxic to the staff? Total alignment is the only path to successful implementation.
But building that alignment requires fuel. You cannot restructure a corporation, overhaul accounting systems, recruit top-tier staff, and develop new institutional skills on enthusiasm alone.
No, you definitely cannot.
You need capital.
Which brings us to the second massive pillar of our deep dive, the absolute lifeblood of strategy execution, resource allocation.
There we go.
You can have the most beautifully aligned 7S spiderweb in the world, but without resources, it's just a theoretical concept. Resource allocation is the procurement and commitment of assets to specific strategic tasks.
Organizations possess an arsenal of resources that must be deployed. Physical resources like the manufacturing plants, the real estate, the machinery. Financial resources, so cash flow, credit lines, investment capital. Human resources, just the sheer manpower and expertise.
Right.
Technological resources like software, patents, proprietary data, and intellectual resources, the brand equity and institutional knowledge. These assets must be carefully gathered and ruthlessly prioritized.
There is a concept here that is a profound aha moment, something that fundamentally changes how you look at business. The deployment of resources sets the operative strategy for the firm. Let that sink in. Operative strategy.
It's a crucial distinction.
It means it completely does not matter what the 50-page glossy strategic plan says. It doesn't matter what the CEO claims on a cable news interview. If you want to know what a company's actual real-world strategy is, ignore their words and look at their ledger. Where are they spending the money? Where are they assigning their best engineers? The budget is the strategy.
That is the absolute truth of corporate management. Resource allocation is the loudest form of internal communication. It sends undeniable signals to the entire workforce about what leadership actually values.
Follow the money? Yeah.
Yes. If a company claims its new strategy is cutting-edge AI development, but they continue to allocate 85% of their budget and their top talent to maintaining legacy server farms, they are not an AI company. They are a legacy server company. Allocation commits the organization to the path.
But allocating those resources is a terrifying tightrope walk. You are constantly balancing between two extremes. On one side, if you starve a strategic initiative of funding, maybe because the company is overly conservative or cash is tight, the project slows down, loses momentum, demoralizes the team, and allows competitors to beat you to market.
But the inverse is equally dangerous.
Throwing too much money at it.
Exactly. Throwing massive, unrestrained funding at a new strategic initiative doesn't guarantee success. It often guarantees waste. It breeds inefficiency, masks underlying operational flaws, and drains resources from the core business, ultimately destroying overall financial performance.
So it has to be dialed in perfectly.
The allocation must be precise, particularly during strategic pivots. If the strategy dictates aggressively expanding product line A while gradually phasing out product line B, the financial spigots must be adjusted accordingly. Massive capital must flow to A, and resources must be actively and sometimes painfully withdrawn from B.
Which brings up a massive trap that companies fall into, and it's prime material for your exam, the danger of the formula approach.
Oh, this is a big one.
It is so tempting for a stressed-out executive team to just use a mathematical formula to allocate resources. To say, all right, to be fair, every single department gets a flat 10% increase over last year's budget, or every product line gets allocated funds equal to 15% of their past sales. Why is that seemingly fair approach actually disastrous?
Because strategy is fundamentally about the future, while mathematical formulas are fundamentally anchored in the past.
That's a great way to put it.
If your organization is undergoing a strategic shift, say moving away from a declining, obsolete product line to invest heavily in a speculative new technology, a historical formula will destroy you.
Because it just repeats last year's mistakes.
Right. Because the dying product line generated a lot of sales last year, the formula will automatically allocate it massive funding this year. Conversely, because the new vital technology hasn't generated any sales yet, the formula will starve it of the R&D funds it desperately needs to survive.
It's exactly like watering a garden. Imagine you have a massive garden with a mature, drought-resistant cactus and a newly planted, incredibly fragile tomato plant.
Okay, I see where this is going.
A formula approach says, to be fair, I am going to give every single plant exactly 1 liter of water every day. What happens? You absolutely drown the cactus, causing the roots to rot from overwatering, and you severely dehydrate the tomato plant because it needs constant moisture in the topsoil to grow.
You kill both plants.
Yes.
Yes.
You have ignored the specific environmental needs of the entities. You have to allocate resources based on what the strategic plan requires that specific division to achieve, not based on a lazy, arbitrary historical rule.
That garden analogy perfectly illustrates the failure of historical budgeting. Resources should never be allocated simply because a division has historically received them, nor should they be withdrawn simply because of a temporary dip in performance if the long-term strategic potential remains high.
So, if simple formulas are out, how do managers navigate these complex trade-offs? How do they resolve the inevitable conflict when every single division is screaming for more money?
They utilize a specific arsenal of analytical tools.
Let's open up that toolbox. The most common framework is the budgetary system, but there are specific models to guide the thinking. Let's start with the BCG matrix. We usually study this as a marketing or portfolio analysis tool, but it is equally powerful as a resource allocation map.
The Boston Consulting Group matrix forces management to look at their entire portfolio of businesses and make hard, unsentimental decisions about cash flow.
The cash cows and dogs.
Yes. It dictates that the surplus capital generated by your cash cows, the mature, dominant businesses in slow-growing markets, must not be reinvested back into the cash cow beyond basic maintenance.
Right, you milk them, you don't feed them extra.
Exactly. Instead, that surplus must be forcefully reallocated to fund your stars and your question marks, the high-growth, high-potential ventures that are burning through cash as they try to capture market share.
And it forces you to face reality regarding the dogs, the businesses with low market share in stagnant markets. The matrix says you don't keep funding a dog just out of nostalgia. You gradually withdraw resources, strip it down, and redirect that capital to the future of the company.
Another conceptual tool is product lifecycle budgeting. This is the simple recognition that the resource demands of a product change drastically depending on its maturity.
Just like the plans.
Right. A product in the introductory or aggressive growth stage requires a massive influx of capital for marketing, R&D, and capacity building. A product in the mature or decline stage should be generating cash, not consuming it. The budget must impact to the life cycle.
But the most radical, aggressive tool in the arsenal is zero-based budgeting, or ZBB.
Oh boy, ZBB.
This is a concept that strikes absolute terror into the hearts of middle managers everywhere, because it completely changes the psychology of the budgeting process.
It really does. In traditional incremental budgeting, a manager takes last year's budget spreadsheet, adds 5% to account for inflation or a slight growth target, and sends it up the chain. It's super easy.
Very easy, but the underlying dangerous assumption is that everything the department did last year was necessary, and therefore they should keep doing it this year. Zero-based budgeting shatters that assumption. It requires managers to justify every single dollar of their budget request from absolute scratch, from zero.
You literally have to prove why your entire department deserves to exist. Imagine the panic of a manager who has been coasting for 5 years, suddenly having to document exactly how their team's daily activities contribute to the new corporate strategy.
It's a rude awakening.
If you can't prove your strategic worth, your budget is zero.
It is an organizational trauma, but often a necessary one. ZBB forces a complete recalculation of all activities. It forces managers to deeply review their operations, discard obsolete projects, and fiercely prioritize the future.
No more zombie projects.
Right. It eliminates the funding of zombie projects that only exist because of institutional inertia. If we connect this to the bigger picture, ZBB is essentially a mechanism to forcibly align the systems from our McKinsey 7S model with the strategy. It forces the financial plumbing of the company to reflect the new strategic reality.
It's a forceful realignment.
And speaking of plumbing, the tools also differentiate between capital budgets and operating budgets.
Capital budgeting involves the long-term, massive commitments of resources. This is the money used for acquiring another company, building a new manufacturing facility, or executing a joint venture.
The big bets.
The huge bets. Because the stakes are so high, capital budgeting relies on rigorous financial modeling techniques like net present value, internal rate of return, and payback period analysis to ensure the long-term investment yields maximum returns.
Operating budgets, on the other hand, are the daily routine allocations that keep the lights on. And these can be fixed or flexible. Fixed budgeting commits resources based on a strict, predetermined level of activity.
But the danger there is hoarding.
Yeah. If a division's activity level drops unexpectedly, the manager will often invent ways to spend their fixed budget anyway, just so they don't lose it next year, depriving other divisions of those funds.
Use it or lose it mentality. To counter that, companies use flexible budgeting systems. This allows for the dynamic transfer of funds from one unit to another if actual activity levels deviate from the forecast.
It's way more agile.
It is. It ensures capital isn't sitting idle in a slow department while a fast-growing department is starving. However, it requires intense monitoring and can sometimes encourage managers to treat their initial budget requests less seriously, knowing the numbers can be shifted later.
So those are the rational tools.
Mm.
But when the executive committee is sitting in a room looking at the BCG matrix, looking at the ZBB requests, and they have to make the final call on who gets the money, what are the actual official criteria they use?
The official process relies on three primary criteria. First, contribution to organizational objectives. Management must objectively assess which projects directly propel the core mission forward, steering funds away from tangential efforts.
Makes sense.
Second, support of key strategies. Since demands for cash will always exceed the supply, capital must flow to initiatives that either build distinctive core competencies or enhance value chain activities that drive the company's ultimate goal. Whether that goal is becoming the absolute low-cost leader or achieving premium differentiation.
And the third criterion is the risk acceptance level. Every strategic investment carries a probability of failure. A conservative, century-old banking firm has a drastically lower risk tolerance than a 5-year-old Silicon Valley biotech startup.
Exactly.
The allocation of resources must be measured against the specific risk appetite of the organization's stakeholders.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back on this entire framework.
Let's hear it.
All of these tools, the BCG matrix, net present value calculations, zero-based budgeting, objective criteria, they sound flawless. They sound like pure physics. They assume that everyone inside a corporation is a perfectly logical, hyper-rational robot, making decisions solely for the greater good of the corporate mothership.
But that isn't reality. People are selfish. People have massive egos. People have mortgages to pay and careers to protect. Doesn't the raw, messy reality of office politics basically ruin all this perfect math?
You are absolutely correct, and this is where the academic theory meets the brutal reality of corporate life. Resource allocation is very rarely a purely rational mathematical decision.
Messy.
It is an intensely behavioral, highly political process. It involves ambitious human beings who are often motivated by objectives that have nothing to do with the strategic plan.
This is the messy reality. And to understand it, we have to look at the difference between explicit objectives and implicit objectives.
Explicit objectives are the official stated goals printed in the annual report. We will increase market share by 5%. We will transition to sustainable materials.
The stuff PR puts out.
Exactly. But implicit objectives are the unwritten operative goals of the individuals actually running the company. What do they really want? They want power, prestige, job security, larger bonuses, and larger teams to manage.
A personal agenda.
And the profound reality of organizational behavior is that the allocation of millions of dollars is frequently guided far more by the implicit desires of powerful individuals than by the explicit math of the strategy.
It's the classic corporate scenario. The explicit objective from the CEO is to streamline operations and cut costs by 10%. But the general manager of the European division has an implicit objective. I want to be seen as the most powerful executive in the company, so I need to manage the biggest budget and the highest headcount.
Right.
So instead of cutting costs, they hoard resources, inflate their budgets, and use their political leverage to block the streamlining efforts. Resources equal power.
And that dynamic is fueled by dominant strategists and powerful internal networks. Sometimes, a highly charismatic or politically entrenched SBU head will secure a massive allocation of funds far beyond what the BCG matrix or ZBB would rationally dictate, simply because they have the political clout to demand it.
So they can throw their weight around.
Exactly. Furthermore, every department head knows the personal preferences and pet projects of the CEO or the board of directors. Savvy managers will intentionally twist their budget requests to align with those personal preferences, bypassing the rational criteria entirely to secure funding.
It's a game of corporate survival. And it's not just internal politics ruining a math. External forces can instantly hijack a perfectly planned resource allocation strategy.
External influences are highly disruptive. A company might have a flawless 5-year capital budget for R&D expansion, but suddenly the government passes aggressive new pollution control laws.
Boom, strategy derailed.
Instantly, massive amounts of capital must be diverted to upgrade factory safety equipment, starving the R&D budget. Or activist shareholders might suddenly demand higher quarterly dividends, draining the cash reserves. Financial institutions might tighten lending covenants, forcing unexpected debt repayments. The rational plan is constantly battered by external reality.
Which brings us to the final gauntlet. The specific day-to-day realities that create massive friction for anyone trying to implement a strategy. These are the 7 difficulties in resource allocation.
These are critical for the exam.
Yes, if you are going to be tested on the reality of management, this is it. Let's explore them. Difficulty number 1, the fundamental scarcity of resources.
This is the bedrock problem. There is never enough to go around. Even if a strategy is brilliant, the physical or financial resources simply might not exist. The cost of borrowing capital might be prohibitively high due to macroeconomic interest rates.
Like we're seeing now in many markets.
Right. Or perhaps the company has billions in cash, but the strategy requires 1,000 specialized AI engineers, and those human resources simply cannot be hired fast enough. The strategy hits a wall of scarcity.
Difficulty 2, restrictions on generating resources, specifically for new ventures. Imagine a company launches a brand new, highly innovative division that represents the entire future of the business. But in the short term, that new division is burning cash and generating 0 revenue.
It's in the investment phase.
Right. If the corporate budgeting process forces that fragile new division to compete for funds on equal footing with the mature, cash-generating legacy divisions, the new division will lose every time. The legacy divisions will point to their revenue and say, "Give us the money." The system inadvertently starves the future to feed the past.
Difficulty 3 is a direct result of the political environment we discussed. Bloated demands. Because managers know that resources equate to power, and because they live in constant fear of executive budget cuts, they engage in defensive padding.
Padding the numbers.
They will intentionally fabricate and submit inflated budget demands. They ask for $10 million when they only need $7 million, fully expecting top management to cut $3 million. This completely subverts the strategic process because the executives are trying to allocate resources based on fictional data.
It is a giant high-stakes game of chicken. And the executives know the managers are padding the numbers, so they cut them even deeper, which forces the managers to pad them even more next year. It's a vicious cycle of distrust.
A terrible cycle.
And what happens when a division loses that game? Difficulty 4, negative attitudes. When a team doesn't get the funding they requested, they don't just quietly accept the strategic rationale.
Definitely not.
They feel slighted. They develop deep resentments toward corporate leadership. In extreme cases, they might even actively work at cross purposes, dragging their feet and obstructing the implementation of the strategy out of sheer spite.
Which is deeply connected to difficulty 5, the trauma of budget battles. The process of securing funds is not a polite negotiation. It is often a fierce, highly visible internal war.
Gladiators in suits.
Truly. And the outcome has profound consequences for a manager's career. If a department head goes into the executive budget battle and gets utterly defeated, returning to their team with a slashed budget, they lose massive credibility. Their subordinates feel the manager is weak and cannot protect them.
It destroys their leadership.
This loss of respect destroys morale and leads to non-cooperation, neutralizing that manager's ability to lead the implementation.
Difficulty 6, budgetary process flaws. The mechanics of the budgeting process itself can be broken. If the executive team dramatically shifts the company's strategy in January, but the budgeting software and the financial review processes are still locked into last year's priorities and don't allow for mid-year adjustments, the strategy is paralyzed.
The plumbing is clogged.
Exactly. If the strategic shifts aren't clearly communicated down to the financial controllers managing the spreadsheets, the money will continue to flow in the wrong direction.
Finally, difficulty 7, the inherent disadvantage of new SBUs. The budgetary process in large corporations is deeply entrenched in historical precedent, unwritten rules, and long-standing relationships. A newly formed strategic business unit enters this arena totally blind.
They don't know who to take to lunch.
Exactly. They don't know the intricacies of the corporate forms, they don't have historical favors to call in, and they don't know how to play the political game. As a result, new, vital strategic initiatives are often outmaneuvered by legacy divisions simply because they are inexperienced at corporate infighting.
So what does this all mean? Put yourself in the shoes of our listener. You are about to graduate with your MBA. You are stepping into a middle management role at a massive corporation. You've learned that you have to master the McKinsey 7S model to keep the organization aligned. You have to endure the trauma of zero-based budgeting.
It's a lot on your plate.
You have to ensure your reward systems don't accidentally punish the exact innovation your CEO is demanding. And on top of all that, you have to survive vicious, highly political budget battles where your peers are bloating their demands and hoarding power just to implement a basic strategic plan.
The reality of management is exactly that complex, and the overarching lesson of strategy implementation is this: you cannot rely solely on the math.
Right.
The most successful strategists prioritize the allocation of resources in the very early stages of planning, and they dedicate immense attention to the behavioral, psychological, and political dynamics of the organization. If you design a strategy that only works for perfectly rational robots, the messy reality of human beings will destroy it before it ever gets off the ground.
We have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. Let's do a quick, hard wrap-up to lock this narrative in for your exam. We started by shattering the illusion that strategy implements itself.
It definitely doesn't.
We looked at the hard, unforgiving tracks of legal compliance, like the Companies Act, SEBI, labor laws, that must be navigated before a single strategic move is made. We explored how functional action plans bridge the gap between vision and daily tasks.
We then analyzed the profound psychological barriers to execution, how poorly designed short-term quantitative reward systems can inadvertently kill long-term strategic shifts and breed deeply risk-averse cultures.
The EV versus SUV example.
Right. We examined the delicate balance of individual versus group rewards based on team interdependence and the danger of SBU managers acting as isolated warlords.
We visualized the entire organization through the McKinsey 7S model, the interconnected spiderweb of hard elements like strategy, structure, systems, and soft elements like style, staff, skills, and superordinate goals. We cemented Chandler's rule: structure must always follow strategy.
And finally, we explored the lifeblood of it all: resource allocation. We established that the budget is the ultimate operative strategy. We discussed the analytical tools, the BCG matrix, product lifecycle budgeting, and the rigors of zero-based budgeting.
The terrifying ZBB.
But crucially, we unveiled the messy reality. For your exam, remember the profound disconnect between the explicit objectives a company claims to pursue and the implicit objectives that actually drive its managers. Remember why simple formulas fail, and how corporate politics, bloated demands, and budget battles can hijack the most brilliantly formulated plan.
It is a completely different way of looking at a business. It takes that pristine, perfect PowerPoint presentation and drags it down into the muddy, complex, deeply human trenches where success is actually forged.
This raises an important question, though, a final thought for you to mull over as you close your textbooks and prepare for the real world. We spent this entire time dissecting how implicit objectives, the unwritten desires for comfort, power, or security, often completely override the explicit objectives in a corporation. Look at your own life right now. What are your explicit objectives? You tell your peers, I want to master this material. I want to be a visionary leader. I want to build a great career. But what are your implicit objectives? What actually dictates how you allocate your own scarce resources of time, focus, and energy on a daily basis?
Wow.
Are you padding your own schedule? Are you avoiding the difficult, risky tasks to stay comfortable? Because if you cannot identify and align the explicit and implicit objectives within yourself, you will never be able to align them across a Fortune 500 company.
That is a heavy but incredibly vital truth to leave on. A strategy is only as good as its execution, whether in the boardroom or in your own life. To our listener, thank you for letting us be part of your study process. Best of luck on your strategic management exam. Keep digging, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We will catch you next time.